Maybe I could just give you just a paragraph on what we're trying to accomplish and what we've been working at for the past few years, but it really was not until I got to know you that you informed me that in fact all of my work has been informed by systems thinking. It's what I'm doing on a regular basis, so I've learned a lot from your workshops and a lot of the work that you have done, so thank you for that as well. So maybe before I get to your particular question, I can give you, just as I say, a paragraph on what we've been up to. So we've been trying to think through some of the macro level challenges that we face in the international security space. I myself come from the world of proliferation, working in government initially, and now for the past decade or so in the think tank community on some of these grand challenges that we face as an international community. And we've tried to begin to recalibrate how we think about that particular challenge, the challenge of proliferation.
Proliferation
of weapons of mass destruction, yes ma'am. And we recognize that while there is a small community, and it's a very, in fact, small community, generally in the global north, that has an abiding interest and concern over the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. In fact, when you go out of major capitals of New York, of Washington, of Ottawa and Vienna and London and Paris, the community of interest in the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction is very, very small. You go to countries across the global south, and there's virtually no interest. And what interest that there may be there is an ethereal one and largely an academic one. And it's not unreasonable.
Right.
When you look at the challenges that these governments face, be it countries in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, one can imagine that even in the security space, these governments face much more pressing challenges than this distant and ethereal threat of weapons of mass destruction.
Right. They're not building nuclear weapons. They're not harboring biolabs, bioterrorist communities and providing them with labs. It's not what's going on there.
Exactly. They can certainly, and I think that there's a growing interest in Washington and elsewhere, that they can be conduits, that they can be part of a proliferation supply chain, either as a transshipment point, increasingly because of economic development, because of globalization, which we all rightly champion. We have technology being pushed into the global south at an unprecedented pace, and it's yielded tremendous results. The past 5 years alone, 500 million people, Louise, 500 million people have escaped that grinding poverty of living on less than $1.25 a day. 500 million people. This is a remarkable success story for the development community.
Right.
It's largely attributable to this global push of technology and know-how and innovation southward.
Right.
But that comes, of course, with a dark side. It comes with the capacity to innovate sensitive dual-use technologies, to transship those technologies that ultimately can contribute to the WMD proliferation supply chain. So that there certainly is a security basis for proliferation concerns in the global south.
Right.
But these governments, meanwhile, are struggling to combat malaria. They're struggling to combat the outbreak of HIV/AIDS. They are fighting youth gangs, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which is its own weapon of mass destruction, drug trafficking, precisely. These are the priority concerns of these governments.
Sure.
So we have been working to try to recalibrate some of these interests and see where we might find innovative nexus points between these two worlds.
How's that going for you?
Well, let me tell you, it's been very interesting, and in fact, it really circles back, I think, to your question, which I should have left a trail of breadcrumbs that have been going on so long. But it's very interesting to me as we went out to sub-Saharan Africa, particularly Eastern Africa, as we went to the Caribbean, as we went to Central America, as we've been to parts of the Middle East, to Southeast Asia, parts of the other parts of what we once called the developing world, and began to listen to what their perceptions of security, because as you know, the construct for us, particularly in this 9/11 world, has been so centered on combating global terrorism, on preventing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, these high-level strategic concerns that are dominated essentially by the West.
Right.
And
And
driven by
about the
the
West.
Exactly.
Like, we're worried about terrorism on us,
Precisely.
not on Ecuador,
That's precisely.
No,
That's
or-
exactly right.
Guinea.
Exactly. So when we go to these governments, in these government-to-government relationships, and we try to sell global counterterrorism programs, proliferation prevention programs, it's a sizable challenge, as you can well imagine. Governments do not want to divert what are extremely scarce resources from combating the drug cartels to preventing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So even when we exert our influence and, more importantly, our dollars
Right.
to conduct programs on the ground in the global counterterrorism space, in the proliferation space, it's really seen as a sidebar to many of these governments, and it's essentially unsustainable.
Right.
Because the dialogue is very different. We are saying weapons of mass destruction, global counterterrorism, and they are responding small arms, drug cartels, public health, and on infrastructure development, and on and on and on. And so we have very much this, we're ships that passing in the night, really. But to your second question, how is it going for you? As we disaggregate the reach and the programmatic activities that are embedded in our foreign security assistance abroad, be it in the non-proliferation space, in global counterterrorism, into its aggregate components, and say, well, what does this mean? What does it mean that the United States government wants to reach out and conduct non-proliferation programming in Kenya? It means an array, for instance, of border security activities. It means an array of public health, in fact, activities as we try to isolate pathogen collections, as we try to train the medical and scientific community in the region on biosafety and biosecurity standards. And on down the list, as we train law enforcement officers, we train border agents, and as we build infrastructure that ultimately is dual benefit in terms of contributing to economic development and the prospects for economic development while promoting proliferation prevention. And so in fact, as we disaggregate it, we look at these dual use or dual benefit components to the assistance that we may call proliferation, but you as the government of Kenya may receive as public health assistance or as assistance in preventing Al-Shabaab from crossing your border from the north, and so on and so forth. So we've actually had a great deal of success in changing the narrative between our strategic goals as Westerners to meet some of their higher priority needs as members of the Global South.
And that's working. That's been successful.
It's been extraordinarily successful in key regions in strategic regions that we've done. We really initially launched this in the Caribbean, and today we see new non-proliferation assistance, what we consider non-proliferation assistance, heading into the region and supporting programs on the ground that they view certainly as non-proliferation as an aside, but really contributing to their ability to compete in the global economy, modernize ports, transportation infrastructure modernization, and so on and so forth. That's actually contributing to their ability to, in their mind, become the next Singapore or the next Dubai.
So you went like this with your hands before, but it sounds like what you've really done is the old standard, conflict resolution technique, because that's my background, of listening to their needs and saying, here's what we need, here's what you need, how can we make this work for both, to satisfy both of our needs and interests?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Louise. I mean, what's been interesting to me is that when we embarked upon this path, we approached the development community. And we said, we want to learn from how you have successfully engaged some of these governments. And they've done a lot of great things wrong, for sure. But they've done a lot of things right as well, I think it's fair to say. And, when we had our light bulb moment that, what we really need to do is listen to their needs first rather than preaching their legal mandates or conducting threat analyses on their behalf and say, here's what your problem is.
Right.
You know,
You mean you don't go in waving the 1540 flag?
We do not.
We're here representing the UN resolution to take care of you.
As you can imagine, the development community thought, well, you know, this is not a light bulb moment. We've been doing this for decades, or at least trying to do this for decades. And it occurred to us that we in the security community, particularly in that hard security space, where our budgets for counterterrorism, where our budgets for non-proliferation have reliably gone up and up and up and up every year, we really haven't had to do that because we're fat and happy, and we can count on a higher budget next year than we had the year before, and certainly the year before that.
Yeah.
That's changing now, of course. But for us, it was a telling moment that, you know, we're adopting really and traveling now and being forced because of budget restrictions to travel a path that the development community has had to travel for many, many years because they've been scraping nickels together and trying to make their programs work.
So you talk about we. You work for a think tank.
Mm-hmm.
What does a think tank have to do with all of this? I mean, it seems to me the UN has a program, the US government has a program. How is a think tank?
That's a great question. It's an oddball think tank in that we really do walk the line between innovating the next big idea and actually working and getting our hands dirty with program managers, be it in the private space or in the public space with governments, and certainly at the level of international and sub-regional organizations, regional organizations, in helping them think through how they can better stretch their resources and implement those resources in a more sustainable way. So in the Caribbean, we pulled together a consortium of the Organization of American States, of the Government of Canada, the Department of Foreign Affairs, of their International Development Agency, of the sub-regional organization in the Caribbean, CARICOM, of the State Department, Export Control and Border Security Program, this kind of motley crew of weirdos that came together, all had an interest in a certain piece of it. Right. And really together we created a new narrative to get forward momentum. We did something similar in Central America with many of the same actors, in the Middle East, now in Africa. We've been working very closely with the government of Kenya, with NGOs on the ground in the region, the Africa Peace Forum and others, who know and understand the region, understand the culture, understand the needs far better than we ever will. And they can walk us through what does this needs analysis look like, and how can we plug in our higher order priorities with what they frankly consider highest order priorities.
But you're not in a position to give them money to do these projects.
We don't. We see ourselves as matchmakers, basically, with between the donor community. We have an idea, we have a need, and we have a donor community, and we get in between those interests and try to put the puzzle pieces together in a what we hope is an innovative way that will ultimately yield forward momentum on the ground.
You have a name for that in Yiddish.
I can't wait.
The shidduch. You're the matchmaker. You're the old Yenta lady who goes in and says, I think you would make a good partner for you.
Sometimes I feel like an old Jewish lady.
I am an old Jewish lady. So you're convening, you're listening, and you've said several times, so I want to highlight it, you're reframing the story. You're inviting people to tell another story.
I think that's exactly right, Louise.
And that is one of the core principles of systems thinking, by the way.
Thank you.
Is that all systems operate within a context of their environment, and for human systems, that context is the meaning we make or the stories we tell ourselves about what's important.
Lesson number 62 from Louise Diamond.
There you go. No, see, right out of your mouth. Anything else you want to add, Brian?
No, I just want to thank you again for all of your hard work on this, for the opportunity to do this, and wish you well.
And to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Louise.